Okay, so this video is for page 101, and our goal is that we're going to solve polynomial equations, and we're going to use graphing, synthetic division, factoring, and quadratic formula. So number 1 says that I need to solve this by finding the possible roots. Well, this has 4 terms, so I'm going to make 2 groups. The first 2 are a group, and the last 2 are a group. In the first 2, you can pull out an x squared, and then you're left with x plus 2. And then in the next 2, you can pull out a minus 2. Nope, sorry. A minus 4. And that's going to leave you with an x plus 2 equals 0. This group and this group both have an x plus 2. I'm left with my x squared minus 4 equals 0. And then you can factor one more time, because this is the difference of 2 squares, into plus 2 and x minus 2. So now you know that you have roots or zeros of x equals negative 2 and x equals 2. And this negative 2 has a multiplicity of 2. So if I go over to my graph, at positive 2 I know that I have to go through, and negative 2 I have to touch that one also. This polynomial was an odd degree, so the ends go in opposite directions. And since the leading coefficient out here is positive, the left side goes down and the right side goes up. And so what's going to happen is you're going to go up, and because this had a multiplicity of 2, you're going to bounce off of it and do something like that. The next one isn't as pretty because there's not much that I can pull out of these two that's going to make these two look the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my calculator, and I'm going to grab a graph page, and I'm going to type that equation in. So I'm going to type x cubed minus 6x squared plus 7x plus 2. And you should get a graph that looks just like that. None of those zeros are very pretty. You can tell right here it's not quite at 0. And right here, that might exactly be 2, so we can try 2. And then this one's a little off over here. So it looks like it goes right through 2, and so we're going to try synthetic division, and let's see if that works. So I'm going to put 2 in the little house and do 1, negative 6, 7, 2. Drop down your 1. 2 times 1 is 2. Add these together, you get negative 4. Multiply these, you get negative 8. Add these, you get negative 1. Multiply these, you get negative 2. Remainder of 0. So 2 is a root or a 0 for this equation. So now what we've proven, because we did the math, is that 2 is a 0. So now we're left with x squared minus 4x minus 1 equals 0. To solve that, you would have to use the quadratic formula, because that's not going to factor. So x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. So you're going to have 4 plus or minus the square root of negative times the negative is a positive, so this is really the square root of 20 over 2. And we're just going to use our calculator to approximate the two decimal equivalents. So I'm just going to type my calculator. 4 plus the square root of 20 over 2. And I'm going to press Control Enter so it approximates it for me. So x is approximately 4.236, and then actually if you arrow up and highlight that, and then you can edit it and copy it, change it to a minus sign, and then approximately negative 0.236. And if I go back to my graph, that negative 0.236 is that little 0 right there, and that 4 point whatever is this 0 over there. So now I have all of my zeros. They each have a multiplicity of 1. So if I call that negative 1, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. I know that 2, so there's my negative 0.236, and there's my 0 at 2, and then my 1, 2, 3, there's my 0 at 4.236. It's an odd, and it has a positive leading coefficient, so we can approximate that my graph does something like that. Okay, for the bottom two. Okay, so for letter C, I had to do a very similar process. And I graphed it. And you can tell that 2 is a 0, but I bounced off it, so 2 should be a 0 twice. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to put, negative 2. I'll put negative 2 in the house to do synthetic division, and I'm going to put 1, 3, 0, because there's no x's, and negative 4. Multiply this out. And since we think this is a 0 that counts twice, I'm going to put negative 2 in the house again. This leaves me with x minus 1. So now I know my zeros are x equals negative 2 with a multiplicity of 2, and x equals 1 with a multiplicity of 1. And I can go up to my graph, and I'm going to go negative 2, 1. I have to bounce off this one and then go through that one like that. And then for number 4, again, this one doesn't factor so nice and pretty. So what you're going to do is you're going to try to do it by yourself, and then you're going to come back to the next video, and I'll quickly show you the answer before we do videos for page 102.